6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical. So step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.
Hi everybody, welcome to 6 Feet Apart Productions and Sunday Night Stories. And today we're bringing you 6 fabulous authors. So the authors are going to be telling stories, not reading stories, but telling stories, all to do with one or other of their books or some backstory to the book or something like that. So now authors, as you know, are having an especially hard time during the pandemic, particularly if you've been writing a book and it's your baby basically, and then you wait, you get it published, and then all the bookstores shut and nobody's around to buy your book. There's no in-person readings. You can't sign lovingly your name in a book. It's just gut-wrenching. So that's why we thought we'd have a little show to show them some love and to hopefully introduce you to some new books that you might not have known, some new authors, and hopefully you'll go out and buy their books. Now, what we're going to do as well, we're going to, at the end of each story, we're going to pull a name out of the hat, properly a hat, and then that person will win a signed copy of that book. So wait for that. And as we said, also 25% of all the proceeds from tonight's show are being donated to Marcus Bookstore in Oakland, which is the oldest independent Black bookstore in the country, apparently. And they have books by and about Black people everywhere. And they're just about to have their 60th anniversary, and they've got a fundraiser. And so we're going to put the link for that in the chat in a moment of YouTube. And so hopefully you can then go, and if you feel like donating a bit more to Marcus Books, they're a very worthy bookstore. Now, tonight also what we're doing is our second time doing this. We've got a live audience. And in a minute, we're going to show our live audience. And after each author has told their story, they're going to wave and clap and generally be, you know, a bit noisy just in the times when the curtains open after the storyteller. So perhaps we can bring our live audience on for everyone to see. Yes, there we are. Wave, everybody. I want to say you're on candid camera, but that's a British thing and nobody will know what I'm talking about. But I'll know. Okay, so that's what's happening. So you'll see the audience at various times throughout the evening, just to clap and cheer, and our storytellers themselves will be able to actually see all their faces when they're telling their story, which is really nice to have sort of some feel of an audience. Now, if you can also put some comment in the chat of YouTube, tell us where you are, where you're watching from. If you like any of the stories, then let's have some virtual emojis or things like that. It's really nice to, when you're a storyteller, it's really nice to get some sort of a feedback. Oh yeah, now what we say also when you're watching this is make yourself comfortable, maybe make it like a bit like a theatre, close the curtains, get yourself a nice drink, turn off your mobile phone, get your pets all comfy on the sofa, and then settle down and watch a really good show. So all our stories are, hopefully they're not going to be a political rant, they're not going to be anything too outrageous. Hopefully there'll not be too much swearing, but we don't know exactly what they're going to say, so just little ears might have to just be a little bit blocked. Just be mindful, we don't actually know what they're going to say. Okay, so now I'm going to get on with our show. Excuse me. Our first storyteller tonight lives in Wisconsin, so she's a couple of hours ahead of us, bless her, so she's staying up a bit later, and we're hoping that she's not in the middle of all the protests at the moment. She is a lit camp alum, and her first novel is called The Second Home, and this was actually published during the pandemic, bless her, at the beginning of June by St. Martin's Press. So she hasn't had a lot of unfortunately, a lot of in-store book readings. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, and then many others. Her novel, The Second Home, was Amazon's Book with Buzz for June 2020. And then it was the recommended novel for Good Morning America. Zibby Owen said it was one of the 25 novels you'll want to read this summer. So there you go. Zibby says so. She also has a PhD in English from UW Milwaukee and has recently actually completed her second novel. So if you like her first one, her second one will be coming out, hopefully, fingers crossed, next year when maybe there's a bookstore to go into. Now, I'd like to ask all our storytellers, and everybody who's on our show, something funny or a bit unusual that they don't tell many people or not many people know about them. So now this is not necessarily that secret because she did get it published in the New York Times on the part of the Modern Love series. But what she said was she used to be a spin class instructor, so she's very fit. And she had the opportunity to exact some revenge on her best friend's cheating husband during a spin class. Now, it's a hilarious story and you can find it in the Modern Love, and actually in the YouTube details I've posted the link to that Modern Love article, and also all our authors, all their websites are down below, so you please go and click and see their books and like them and send them some love and follow them on Facebook and social media, all the things I don't even know about. So that is our amazing first author, and her name is Christy Clancy.
Hello, thank you for having me. So this is my novel, The Second Home. You can see it in the corner there as well. Everybody knows that writing a book is a very solitary activity. And for an extrovert like me, selling my book was a big opportunity to be able to go to bookstores and talk to people and have readings and do book clubs. And as you know, I couldn't do any of that because my book came out not only during the pandemic, but it also came out on June 2nd, which is during the social media blackout. So my press couldn't even promote the book. So it kind of felt like farting in a lake, that week. So I was kind of lamenting this, and a couple of weeks after my book came out. So the book takes place partly in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is where I used to live. And there was a story that started circulating among my friends from Milwaukee on social media about a girl who worked at a grocery store. She was disabled and she was asked to buy alcohol by some younger employees. And they pretty much bullied her to buy the alcohol. And she did. She bought it. And then she felt so terrible about it that a week later, she went and talked to her manager at this grocery store, the Metro Market, and she was fired. And so it was a big controversy. People were talking about it a lot, and there were all these news articles. And that might seem unrelated to the story, but then a couple weeks later, I had a book club event via Zoom, which is one thing that I still can do. And I love talking to book clubs. And so we're talking about some of the themes in the book. It's about some siblings who have inherited a house that's been in a family for generations, and they've been estranged, and there's all sorts of conflict. And so we talked about the seduction, like how easy it is for young women to be seduced, because that's part of the book. We also talked about family homes and that, the difficult time in a family when the families change and the parents pass away and the younger kids take over the house. So we're talking about all those things. And then one of the women in the group said, did you hear about the girl from the grocery store? And I said, yeah, I've seen that story all over the media. And she said, well, the reason you know about that story is because of your book. And I was like, how on earth could my book have anything to do with a disabled girl getting fired from a grocery store in Milwaukee and the story that came out afterwards? And she said that what was happening was she was reading my novel at the time that Kroger's had sent them a settlement, which was for $3,500, which the family needed at the time. And she was looking through the finer points of the print in the document. And she said that something stopped her when she saw that there was a gag order, and that if she signed the document, she wouldn't be able to tell anyone about it. And she said, in your story, the characters had such a horrible time communicating. And I found that silence was so devastating for this family that I couldn't bear to have this story not come out. I didn't want to be silenced. So I felt empowered to tell the story. To not sign it, which is really powerful as a writer to hear this. And as it turns out, this story, because it got out, it became something that a lot of disabled advocates all over the country, like as far away as Florida and Hawaii, became active in. And then there was a petition that over 8,000 people signed because it was out and about. And then the girl actually was able to get a job at Trader Joe's. And now she works under somebody who used to be a special ed teacher who's very aware of her aptitudes and so on. And she's also, like, most of all, I think this is the best part, but this girl is kind of a local celebrity. She is known everywhere. She got free tacos when she was at a restaurant. She got a free haircut when she was at a cost cutters. So she feels there's tons of support behind her. So I thought that was pretty wild. And it kind of brought me back to how I felt when my book first came out. And I thought, just because I'm not in a bookstore, just because I'm not going to conferences and meeting with people, there's a sort of connection that happens between a writer and a reader that exists in a different kind of space, but it can change the way people think, and it's what really matters. So I actually, as long as people can find my book, I think that still is the most important part of publishing a book is still happening for me. So thanks for having me. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christy. That's great. How fantastic, though, to not only have someone read your book, which is enough for itself, but have them change their life for the better like that. That's such a great story. Thank you. And I'm so glad you're in Wisconsin. There's no chance of me going to your spin class. Not that I go any exercise at the moment. Oh, there we go. So our next storyteller grew up in St. Louis, which I've actually been to. So one of the few places I've been to in the States. And she says she became a writer because her high school English teacher picked her to be editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. So she started young with her writing career. She's the best-selling author of Are You Kidding Me? And then Are You Still Kidding Me? Because it was so popular. And she describes her writing as funny, relatable, and honest. And I'd say that's completely true. She's also a storyteller, a blogger, and a stand-up comedian. The story she'll be reading today is, well, not reading, she's going to be telling a story called Money Talks. And that was published in another book, which was Chicken Soup for the Soul in their series, Laughter is the Best Medicine. Now, Stacey, her funny thing about her is she tells me she often reads the end of the book before starting the book, which I think is horrifying. So she knows the end before she starts. I mean, for me, if anybody even starts telling me like what's happening in a film, I'm going, not listening, la, 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 la. And she deliberately goes and does it. And she says she's also been known to open up her Christmas presents like a small child and then rewrap them just because she doesn't like surprises. Very strange. So I'm definitely never, ever going to go to the movies with this person. So please welcome Stacey Gustafson.
There. I'm a suburban mom and I write about all things motherhood, marriage, midlife, and beyond. And I recently published a book called Are You Still Kidding Me? It's filled with 45 short, humorous stories about just those topics. And then guess what? Chicken Soup for the Soul wanted to publish a few as well. So tonight, I'd like to share with you my favorite story, Money Talks. My husband's constantly nagging me. We need to discuss our finances. For me, that is about as exciting as listening to Gwyneth Paltrow talk about her Himalayan smoothie or organic skincare line. Who cares? Well, this Saturday, I slid into the living room and I spied my husband. He was perched on the sofa, surrounded by all types of paraphernalia. Yellow-lined paper, loose-leaf notebooks, index cards, dictionaries. He even had 4 ink pens lined up parallel on the sofa. As soon as he spies me, he says, "Hey, good morning. I saved you a seat." And he pats the sofa next to him. He says, "Do you have time to talk about our finances?" Well, I said, I'm so sorry, but I have a meeting in about 5 minutes. He says, "No, you don't. Have a seat. It's a Saturday." Well, For 25 years, he's been trying to corner me to discuss our finances. But really, all I kept thinking was, look, buddy, I'll keep doing all that cooking and cleaning stuff, and you stick with the finances. He then says, seriously, he says, what would you even do if I wasn't here? Do you know our passwords to our banking information? I said, oh yeah, I would call your best buddy, Jeff. He's got all the passwords. Well, his head about exploded off his shoulders and he got all crazy. And I said, look, calm down. I'm just joking. You have my attention. Well, he says, you might want to grab a pad of paper and a pen and start taking some notes. Well, I manage to stay awake as he starts to drone on about long and short-term investments, dividend, interest, stock portfolios, blah, 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 and taxes. Then he says, what do you think we should do about the kids' college fund? I said, we still have kids in college? He said, do you think market risk is best? I thought, what the hell is he talking about? Did he just say whisk, bisque, disc? So all I say is, sure, that sounds great. And then I tried to sidetrack him by saying, have I told you recently that you were so handsome? He says, do you think you could put together some notes on the difference between capital gains and dividend income? I think, what the hell is he even doing? Why is he still talking to me? Well, for 45 more minutes, he drones on. And I try to stay awake, but finally I just slump over the edge of the sofa and pretend to fall asleep. Then he says, seriously, I've lost you already? I said, look, Mike, as soon as you figure out that steam setting on the dryer, I'll help with all the finances. Do you really think that I can go from doing nothing, absolutely nothing, to helping out with this? I'll make you a deal. I'll take really baby steps and I'll put together a year of our expenses. Well, that seemed to satisfy him. He said, oh, great. We'll talk about this in 2 months. What? There will be, this is it. This is all I'm ever talking about this again. Well, he rolled his eyes, stormed out of the room. I think I heard him mumble something like, God help us. And then he headed into the laundry room. And soon I heard whoosh, whoosh, thonk. It was the sound of clothes tumbling in the dryer. In about a half an hour, he comes out with his chest all puffed out, holding a hanger with one of my blouses perfectly steamed. Well, I say to him, fine, you win, because my husband appreciates a challenge and now all of our clothes are wrinkle-free, and I'm learning about itemized deductions. Thanks a lot for listening.
Yay! Thank you, Stacey. Stacey, thank you. Yes, what I think is hilarious is 2 things. One is you've got a steam setting on your tumble dryer. I don't even know what that is. And that your husband worked out how to use it. I'm seriously impressed. My husband does similar things to me, but he does it with things like battleships. He makes his own battleship and can't tell you, just lose the will to live on a daily basis. And I keep saying, you know, you're talking to me, not interested. Doesn't seem to make any difference at all though. Now, last time, I'm a woman of a certain age, I forgot to do the drawing for Christy's book. So we're going to start with the Christy book. So one of you will win the book for Christy. And that is going to be Kimberly Bateman. Kimberly Bateman. So Kimberly, we're going to send you an email after this, probably tomorrow, and ask for your address. And then we'll send it to Christy and she'll send you a signed copy of a book. So when I email you, if you want her to send it, to write to anybody in particular, I'm sure Christy won't mind doing that. Now we've also got Stacey's book, and that's going to be our friend Kate Farrell. So Kate, you've got Stacey's book. So we'll get that over to you as well. So I do know Kate's address already, but I'll communicate with you all afterwards, and we'll get your addresses. Okay, on we go. So our next author tonight is going to be telling a story, and she is not only an multi-award winning author, she's a motivational speaker and a writing teacher. Now, as a young girl, she crossed the US-Mexico border to join her family in Los Angeles, which was a harrowing journey that she wrote about in the book, The Distance Between Us. That is a National Book Critics Circle Award finalist, and has also been adopted as the common read selection by schools, colleges, and cities all across the country. So it's an amazing book. She's also written 3 other books. A novel, Across 100 Mountains, which was the winner of the 2007 American Book Award, Dancing with Butterflies, and a second memoir, A Dream Called Home. She's been on Opera's book club and also the Moth Radio Hour. And if you want to see those, you've actually got them on her website. You can go and do that. Now, her funny little thing that not many people know about her is that her grandfather was left-handed, and he unfortunately died a week before this author was born. But however, he passed on a bit of him. So she was born a lefty like him, and she's the only one in the 18 grandchildren that he produced that is a left-handed. So she thinks this was a gift that was given to her from beyond the grave. So that's really sweet. Grandparents do pass on lovely things. I'm really sorry you didn't actually get to meet him. So here is our third author of the night. So please welcome Raina Grande.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. And yeah, I am very grateful for the gift that my grandfather gave me. For sure, I love being a lefty. I think that's one of the things I love the most about myself, is being left-handed. It is definitely fun to be a lefty. So the story that I'm going to talk about today is about my father, and it is in The Distance Between Us. And I want to talk about my father because next week I'm going to be celebrating my 45th birthday. But in addition to celebrating my life, I'm also going to be mourning the death of my father. He passed away the day before my birthday 9 years ago. So for the last 9 years, it's been really hard for me every time I have a birthday, because I think about my father and I think about him being gone, and I have to mourn his death all over again and relive that day, when he passed away the day before my birthday. So I'm gonna dedicate this event to him and to tell you all about my father. So a few years ago, as you know, the Trump administration began to separate immigrant and asylum-seeking families at the US-Mexico border. And immigrant parents were blamed for the family separation. Jeff Sessions said, if parents don't want their children taken from them, then they should not bring them with them in the first place. That comment really bothered me, and blaming the parents for the family separation happening at the border really bothered me. And it made me think a lot about my father and about the difficult choices that he was faced with. So for me, it's really important, to write books that help people learn more about immigrant families, that help people understand why parents bring their children across the border, even if it means, putting them at great risk. So my father is one of these fathers who was faced with that very difficult choice of bringing me along, risking my life to sneak me across the US-Mexico border. Before he did that, he decided not to risk my life, and instead he left me behind in Mexico. So my father came to the United States when I was 2 years old to look for work. He was an economic refugee. We were really poor in Mexico. There were no jobs. The country was in a deep recession. My father was a bricklayer and he couldn't find work. So he came across the border to look for a job, and he left my mother and his 3 children behind. And I was 2 years old, so I don't remember my father leaving. And the only reason I knew I had a father was because we had this photograph of him hanging on the wall. And every time, I missed my dad, I would look at this photograph and study his face and compare his features to my features. And I look a lot like my father. And that was how I knew I had a father, and I started to call him the man behind the glass. That's what he was to me. When I was 4, my mother also came to the United States, and my siblings and I had to stay behind. So now at this point, I'm 4 years old, and I don't have a mom and I don't have a dad, and there's a border separating us. And my childhood was very difficult, not having my parents with me. It was very hard to live my life, to think about if I would ever see my parents again. And I was really scared of being abandoned by them, being forgotten by them, being replaced by US born siblings. So when I look at my life, I look at a childhood that was full of fear, and it was a very difficult childhood. I was very fortunate because my father did come back. He returned to Mexico when I was 9 years old. And one of my most vivid memories of the first time I saw my father was that I had gotten used to seeing him in black and white. And the first time I laid eyes on him in the flesh, I was so shocked that he was in color and that his skin was a beautiful, rich brown, not black and white, like in the photograph. And I was really happy to see my father. And he came back, and he had decided to bring my older brother and my older sister across the border with him and bring them to live with him in Los Angeles. But he was not going to bring me because I was 9 years old. He thought I was too young. He didn't want to risk my life. And he wanted to wait until I got older to see, if there were other possibilities or to see if once I got older, I could make that risky crossing across the border. But I begged my father to bring me. I begged him and begged him and begged him. I couldn't stand the thought of being left behind again. So I begged my father not to leave me again. And I begged him to bring me across the border, even though I knew that I was risking my life, that the stakes were very high in a border crossing. But it was the only way that I could have a father, that I could have a family, that I could stay together with my brother and my sister and not be separated from them. So I think about that moment, as a child, me begging my father to bring me across the border, even though I knew that I was risking my life in doing so. And I think about how, like I said before, the Trump administration tries to blame these parents for endangering the lives of their children without, really helping people understand the very difficult decision that goes behind that and why parents are put in that situation in the first place. So I convinced my father, and at the age of 9, I found myself face to face with the US border. And just like he had said, it was a difficult crossing. I was too little. I kept getting tired. My father ended up carrying me on his back most of the way. We got caught by Border Patrol one time, and then we tried it again, and we got caught again, and we tried it again a second time. We got caught again. And the third time, my father said, this is it. If we don't make it across, you guys are going to have to go back to Mexico. And he had to go back to LA or he was going to lose his job. So luckily, we managed to make it across the border that third time with, of course, my father having to carry me on his back most of the way. So we managed to get across, and that is how I began my life in Los Angeles. And, you know, I wish I could tell you, oh, and that's when I was able to put the border behind me, but that's not how it works. You know, for immigrants, when you manage to cross the geographical border, there are other borders to cross. There's the cultural border. There's the legal border when you're undocumented, just like I was. There's the language border and so many other borders. But eventually I crossed them all. And now, you know, I've been here in this country for over 30 years. I managed to get a college education. I became the first in my family to graduate from a university. I became a professional worker. I was a teacher for many years. Now I'm a professional writer. I'm a homeowner. I have children of my own now. And when I look at my children, I am so grateful for the choice that my father made. You know, it was a difficult choice to risk his children's life to try to give them something better. But if he hadn't made that choice, I would have stayed behind in Mexico. And the best I could have hoped for was to be a maid or be a factory worker making $5 a day. Instead, you know, I'm here living the American dream. But more than that, my children will never have to go through what I went through. You know, they will never experience the poverty that I lived through. They will never experience the heartbreak and the sorrow of being separated from their parents. And that makes me really happy in knowing that. It also breaks my heart because when I think about my father being put in that situation, you know, of having to choose between leaving his children behind or bringing him to the border and risking their lives to give them something better, it breaks my heart because I don't think any parent, no parent, should ever be put in that situation. And I'm really grateful that I will never be that parent that has to make that difficult choice because my father made the choice. And now, because of that, he has spared me in making that choice with my own children. So it's a really, you know, difficult situation for immigrant families. And I really hope that this little story of my own life and the story of my father gives you a little understanding of what it's like for immigrant parents and what it's like for their children. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Raina. Thank you.
Raina, queen.
What an amazing story, and how fabulous. Your dad sounds so lovely, and I'm so sorry that he passed on now. But anyway, third time's a charm, definitely. So thank you for sharing that with us, and looking forward to reading your book. It sounds quite a story. Our next author has been touring and a professional speaker since 1994. He's received tons of awards over the years for his work as a folklorist, a traditional harpist, a storyteller, a community activist, and a volunteer. Long Beach, which is where he lives in California, has recognized him as Artist of the Year, and he's also been honored with commendations from both the US Senate and US Congress. His book, which is called Road of Ash and Dust, Awakening of a Soul, Awakening of a Soul in Africa, has been described as a deeply intimate and somewhat voyeuristic unveiling of aspects of the African-American experience. I highly recommend you going to read that. Now, one of the things that Baba told me that not many people know about him, he's obviously quite a modest chap, was that he was once the director of the largest fathering program in the country. Now, I didn't really know what this actually meant. So he said he helped fathers become better dads by providing resources and speakers, workshops about how to be a better father, going to sporting events and generally helping dads bond with their kids, which I thought was such a lovely thing to do. Could do with more of that, really. And then obviously I want a funny story. So once he said that when he was volunteering with some teen dads, he was trying to help them bond with their babies. So he showed them how to mimic breastfeeding, how a mum breastfeeds, by holding the baby close to your heart while bottle feeding. So then it would mimic, breastfeeding. And then the following week, one of the young men, they were all teenagers, remember, complained, well, you didn't tell us how much it was going to hurt. Because apparently he'd been actually trying to breastfeed his baby. So perhaps he misunderstood just slightly what was happening then. So with that, please join me in a huge welcome to Baba the storyteller.
Iniche ikakenewa. In the language of Bamana out of West Africa, that is a greeting. It's greeting you saying, how are you? How is your health? That is a language out of West Africa. There's more than 800 languages in Africa, but the reason why that's so unique to me is because I wasn't born in Africa. I was born here in the United States in a small town called Killeen in Central Texas. But growing up, I lived a really nomadic existence. I had family all along what we call the Black Belt or the Bible Belt. So Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. So I grew up visiting family all along those areas. And my lived reality growing up, some of my earliest memories, dealt with a lot of violence in this country. One of my earliest memories is the death of Martin Luther King Jr. That's one of my earliest memories. And I grew up hearing stories, family stories, about men in our family who had been lynched. My grandmother would share tales about how our family was forced to observe the lynching of one of her favorite uncles. And it wasn't distant stories. I also grew up witnessing and being a part of things like this growing up as a Black man in this country. But one of the things that helped me a lot were books. So I grew up reading authors like James Weldon Johnson, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Lorraine Hansberry. One of my favorites is James Baldwin. So these were where I found my comfort in books. But because as being a Black boy, growing into my manhood in this country and being subjected to the violence that I swore that when I came of age that I would leave this country and that I would move to Africa. I had a very romanticized image of what Africa was. Africa was the motherland. So I swore to myself that if this country didn't accept me, then I would leave. Thus my book, Road of Ash and Dust, Awakening of a Soul in Africa. Now, the part of the book that I'm going to introduce you to is called The Doorway of No Return. For those of you who are unaware, there's a small island off of the coast of Senegal. The island is called Gorée. And on Gorée, there's this mansion. And beneath the mansion, below the mansion, are cells where enslaved people were kept. Not a lot of people are aware of this. And the cells housed men, women, and they even had a cell for babies, for infants. So when people were taken into slavery and they were put into these cells, there is a door at the back of this, where these cells are, that lead out to the ocean. And the ships would wait for the enslaved people. They would put them in rowboats and then they would row them out to these ships. But this doorway would be the last place that these enslaved men, women, and children would step before they would leave the continent of Africa coming to the Americas. Thus, it's called the Doorway of No Return. So when I was young, I heard about this doorway of no return, and it sat in my heart. It sat in my soul, even as a youth. And I just swore one day that I would go there. I would visit. So the chapter in my book, Road of Ash and Dust, that deals with the Doorway of No Return, deals with me actually having made it back there. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be really honest. my romanticized image of Africa was shattered by having gone there. You learn a lot when you leave home about how important home really is. You learn a lot. But I was accepted, and that's why I began to learn the language. That's why I began to study the craft called Jalia. And on my trip to Gorée, off the coast of Dakar in Senegal, when I finally made it there, I made it to the mansion, and now it's a tourist site. People go to visit this. And so when I went, I had to pay a fee to get in. I had to pay a fee to get into a place where my ancestors had been taken from. And I said, I'm going to be honest with you guys, so I'm just going to be honest. They had different fees. They had fees for Africans, they had fees for Europeans and whites, and they had fees for citizens of Senegal. So when I walked up, they pointed at me and they said, you pay this fee, white man. And I kind of lost it for reasons obvious. And one of the curators came running out and he corrected him. He said, no. This is Black men from America. His ancestors were taken from here. So he said, we don't charge him. He does not pay to come in here. So he opened the door and he said, come in. But I said, no. I had been waiting for this moment for decades. So I told him I would enter, but I would enter through the back. So I walked around this, they call it a mansion, it's small, but I walked around this mansion. And in this area, at that time, the side walls, and there was an open lot, and there were goats grazing, and there were some cows, and a lot of filth. It's where they had dumped their trash. And I remember feeling heartbroken that this place had become a place where trash was left, where these human beings had been taken. But I waded through all of this trash and I made it to the back wall, which at that time, the ocean lapped up against the wall. So I had to walk out into the ocean a little bit to get to the back wall. And the back wall was about 6-7 feet high. And at the edge of the wall is the doorway of no return. So I crawled up this wall thinking about my ancestors. I crawled up this wall thinking about the people who had to walk out of it, never, ever coming back to their own homeland. And it was a bit trying to get up this wall. But when I got up this wall, there's a ledge. It's not a huge ledge, but there's a ledge that you can stand on before going through the doorway. So I stood at the edge of that ledge and I turned around and I looked at the ocean and I just closed my eyes and breathed. And then I turned around and I walked back through that doorway that they call the doorway of no return. And I call it the doorway of returning, the doorway of hope. Because even though it may have taken 240 years for someone of that blood, of that lineage, to go back through there, I like to think that my ancestors are smiling on that moment, that they received something from this. So there's a lot more detail in the book about the doorway of no return and about how I learned the languages, some of the languages in West Africa, and about the music and the storytelling that I do now, that I've been doing almost for 30 years. But that one piece is what people are always asking me about when they read the book. So that is my small introduction to Road of Ash and Dust, Awakening of a Soul in Africa. So I thank you guys for listening and for appreciating what we authors do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love the story.
Thank you. Thank you, Baba. That was a really interesting little story, the backstory to your book, which I can't wait to read again. I've got a huge pile of books I've got to read, but that was really interesting. Thank you. Now, obviously, women have a very small brain. Even though she forgot the first time, I've forgotten already. So I'm going to pull names out of the hat for 2 books again. So I think I'm just going to pretend, even though I've told you, that I'm just doing it after every 2. So now, Raina, who wants to have Raina's book? It's going to be Marie Green. Marie Green, you've got Raina's book. And now, Baba, someone's going to have your book. And that person is James Whittington. Excellent. So both of those 2 people are actually on our audience, in our live audience. So that's lovely. So perfect. So we'll get all the
book
details.
while he was talking too.
I beg your pardon?
I just purchased his book while he was speaking as well. So
Oh, bless you.
Ironic.
give it as a gift. So wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, well, that was nice, James. Thank you. How lovely. Oh, well, that's made for quite teary. Good. Well, perhaps you can gift it to me if you like, James. So our next author is, she grew up in Bakersfield and she was the daughter of Dust Bowl immigrants. She now teaches college writing at Sacramento State and consults with writers in the energy industry. She co-directs Stories on Stage Sacramento, and she acts and performs stories of established and emerging authors. Her novel, Copy Boy, was a finalist in the coming of age category of the 2020 American Fiction Awards. Now, this person's got a really funny little story she told me. So when she was younger, she worked in six fast food restaurants and has 6 polyester uniforms hanging up in her closet as a reminder. However, she's not likely to forget this little experience in a hurry because her last job was at Wendy's old-fashioned hamburgers, and she ended up being locked in a freezer by one guy who was holding up the door with a machete and then another one with a sawn-off shotgun. So needless to say, after that, that was her last time she worked in a fast food restaurant. Can't blame her. Anyway, luckily she's here in one piece to tell us her story. And please welcome to the stage, Shelley Blanton-Stroud.
Thank you. I'm going to tell you a true story, though it never really happened just like the way I'm going to tell it. It's a family story, so you know what I mean about truth, and it never really happened that way. It's at the heart of my novel, Copy Boy. Okay, so picture with me. Kelly is 12 years old. He's living in a tent with his parents and his 5 brothers and 1 sister. 3 more siblings are yet to be born to live in that tent. That tent is planted between a cotton field, an irrigation ditch, and railroad tracks. It's late on an Indian summer night in Central California, just outside of Wasco, and Kelly never likes to sleep in the tent because all of his siblings they share 1 mattress, and you can imagine, it's a nightmare. You never get to sleep. So Kelly prefers really to stay up very late outside the tent in the heat, and sometimes, in fact, quite often, to sleep in the dirt outside that tent. So on this one particular night, 12-year-old Kelly is shooting marbles in the dirt outside the tent with his best friend, Buddy, who lives in the tent just next door. They're fussing, as you can imagine, when the tent flap of Buddy's family tent opens and Buddy's mama comes out. And she puts her hands in her hips and she looks at Buddy and she says, "I need you to get rid of Daddy." Now, Buddy's daddy was a charming man, very charismatic and lovable and interesting, but he was also a drunk and he really didn't work very hard. And in a time of the Dust Bowl and depression, when all the children worked, when Buddy and Kelly and all the siblings got up to pick cotton before school, went to school and picked cotton after school, to have a parent who didn't really reliably work and who in fact often spent the family money on alcohol or women, that was a problem. So Buddy's mama to Buddy, I need you to get rid of Daddy. Buddy stands up, and he at 12 also begins to kind of whimper. And yet he follows his mother into their tent. For some reason that Kelly can't really discern, he gets up and follows them both inside the tent. And what they see there, of course, is Buddy's daddy passed out, drunk. Buddy's mama looks at Buddy again and says, I need you to get rid of Daddy. We ain't gonna make it if you don't. And Buddy looks to be frozen. And at first, Kelly's frozen too, but he's not sure why he does it. But he speaks up before Buddy does. And what he says is, I'll get his feet. You get under his arms. And Buddy looks stricken when he says that. And Kelly says, you get his feet. I'll get up under his arms. And then shockingly to Kelly, Buddy does what he says. He gets his daddy's feet. And Kelly picks up Buddy's daddy under the arms, and they start backing out of the tent. And as they get a little ways away, Buddy's mama says, here are the keys. And she hands them to Buddy. They're the keys to the clunker outside the tent. I need you to get rid of Daddy. Buddy looks horrified, and Kelly takes the keys. They open the back door of the back seat of the clunker, and they load Buddy's passed out father into the back seat. Buddy's sobbing at this point, as you can imagine. So Kelly climbs into the driver's seat. He's 12 years old. He does not know how to drive, but he has driven tractors several times. And he's paid a lot of attention while his daddy drives the car down the highway looking for work. So somehow Kelly gets that old clunker to start up, and he pulls it onto the highway. And Buddy's mama yells at them, Shafter. That's 10 miles away. So they start driving down the road, and Buddy is sobbing. Obviously, he's sobbing. And Kelly's driving, horrified to be driving at 12 years old on such a dangerous mission. And Buddy's caterwauling this way, wakes up his father in the back seat. And his father, though he's really, really drunk, seems to tell right away what this is about. And he begins to cry. And they're both begging Kelly. Buddy says, you can't do this to me. You can't do this to me. And Buddy's daddy says, you won't do this. You won't do this. And Kelly keeps driving. They get to Shafter, and Kelly pulls over. And he knows that Buddy is not part of this anymore. And Kelly opens the back door, and he grabs Buddy's daddy's arms under the shoulders, and he drags him out of the old clunker through the dirt while both Buddy and his daddy are sobbing. And he lays Buddy's daddy on the dirt, and he says, I'm so sorry. And he walks back to the clunker, and he drives that clunker from Shafter to Wasco, 10 miles. And the whole way, now Buddy is kind of curled up and whimpering, fetal-like. And Kelly just drives. And when they get back to Wasco, to their tent camp, Kelly stops the car, and he tosses the keys to Buddy, and he says, I did it so you don't have to. And Kelly went back into his family's tent, a tent he never liked to sleep in. And he got into the one mattress he had to share with his brothers and his sister, and he lay down at their feet amid all the snoring and the snuffling and the coughing in that tent. And he fell right to sleep. He slept well. He slept all the way through the night for the first time in forever. And when he woke up to something that smelled good. And he exited the tent, and his mama and his daddy were making coffee and biscuits and gravy over the fire. And all of his siblings, his 5 brothers, his sister, were fussing and fighting and joking and insulting each other. And Kelly felt right for the first time in a long time. But then he noticed Buddy's family's car was gone. Their tent was gone. Buddy was gone. That was the last time Kelly saw his best friend, Buddy. Like I said, this is a true story that never really happened this way. I've heard this hundreds of times over the past 5 decades, and every time it's different, just as it's different today, and just as it's different in the way I tell my novel. But still, you know, it's a true story. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you, Shelley. Wow, that's quite a story, isn't it? True or not, or partially true, or somebody's memory of some story. Wow, that's quite a good one to have in your family to tell around the kitchen table. Now, I'm going to remember straight away, because I have now become a woman of very clever brain, to remember we're going to give away a copy of Shelley's book, Copy Boy. So let's find out who that's going to be. And it's going to be Joan Chaplick. So Joan Chaplick, you've got Shelley's book. Excellent. Now, we've come to our final author. So last but definitely not least, because she's written 2 award-winning memoirs about her childhood, which when she was searching for connection in the face of appalling abuse, neglect and rejection as a child in the foster care system, in and out of about 30 foster homes. Her books are called Someone Has Led This Child to Believe and Somebody's Someone. And her story's been made into a movie. I mean, we all want that, don't we? But I'm glad I hadn't had to have her life. So a movie, and it's by Lifetime Television feature film, and it had critical acclaim. She's been featured on Good Morning America, KQED Forum, and even the BBC. I mean, praise indeed. Darling, darling. She works currently as a trauma-informed trainer and coach and teaches with the Hoffman Institute. As an advocate, she travels the country, speaking out and raising funds and awareness on the importance of empowerment, choice, trustworthiness, and agency on behalf of foster youth. Bless her. Now, she's got a very, very funny story. I'll try and shorten it as much as I can. So many years back, when Bridget Jones' Diary was all the rage, one of my favourite films, love Bridget Jones' Diary, she was in a theatre dress rehearsal, and one of the people in that rehearsal was Meg Tilly, who's the actress best known for her role in Agnes of God. She just, now this author who's coming on now, had just watched the film about Bridget Jones' Diary and was waxing lyrical about how gorgeous Colin Firth was and how much she'd like to get it on with him and all the lovely manly traits about Colin Firth. And she wondered why everybody wasn't just joining in and agreeing with her, because who doesn't love Colin Firth? And they were giving her funny looks, trying to shut her down. And then the producer walked over, whispered in her ear and said, "Did you know that Colin and Meg were in a heated custody battle, and perhaps it wasn't a good time to fantasize about Colin's man business just at that moment?" So it's mortifyingly embarrassing. So having said that, now let's meet the person herself. Give a massive big girl's pants welcome to Regina Louise.
Oh, you're so funny, Claire. Love is when you do the things you say that you will do. And so there I sat in the big Hollywood agent's office across from her, a fabulous oak desk separating us. There just aren't any Black girls to play you in your movie. Not one. No one, there's no audience for this. That was 19 years ago, 2001. I got up and I left. You say you love me. I was determined. Every white writer I knew, their movies, greenlit, optioned, books that weren't even written were optioned. I don't want your words, 'cause all I need is you. But I was determined. And I told her, you know what? Then I will wait till an actress is born to play me, because I was born to live me. And if that is the case, then I know I wasn't just fortunate. That means that another brown girl will be born to take this role. Love is never wasted when it comes straight from your heart. And so I did what I knew I had to do. I spoke all over the country, and one day I happened to be at a $10,000 a plate United Way fundraiser, and I told the story of how I lived in a series of residential treatment centers, and I lived out my adolescence, not so unlike Nelson Mandela in solitary confinement. And I told them how I would get on the floor where there were no windows, there were no doors, there were no handles, there was no way out. And what I would do is speak into the light. You say you love me. I don't want your words, 'cause what I need is you. And I would wait on that floor for my one day. And I would tell those things to whoever would listen. 42 states, 6,000 cities, again and again and again. Love, it is the greatest gift, the best that we can be. Standing ovations everywhere. And then the director of the Sacramento Theater Company at that United Way $10,000 plate luncheon under a canopy in 100-degree weather in Sacramento. She said, I need to turn that story into a one-woman show. It is the only way that we can all be free. Yes, truly free. So I said yes. And I worked hard. And I stayed in a pool house on a millionaire's property. They brought fresh fruit. I got to swim by the moonlight and rise to the beautiful sun every morning. Fresh orange juice, this and that. And because that one-woman show raised more money than that little theater had seen in its tenure, that director decided I would have no days off. She decided that I would tell this story 7 days a week, twice on Saturday and Sunday. No one could ever take from me the love that came from you. Night after night, I wrote all the music. She tried to offer the job to Tracy Chapman, but I said, no. This is my story. Tracy can tell her stories. I'm gonna tell mine. No one could ever take from you the love that came from me. And then when that show closed and she promised me that it would go to London and we would have a run. But she took that money because she was a Lord D theater. She took all the money, the $50,000 that I was able to raise from an organization who wanted me to get the story written, to recruit foster parents. And she had to pay her bond to keep her theater alive. 'Cause if they do, then it was never meant to be. So I took my little story with my told through 30 different pairs of shoes, and I mounted my play everywhere I could, beyond the bench, so that every judge in the country could see it. And then I mounted it in a mausoleum, dead people all around. I thought, hell, if Jesus can raise a Lazarus, then surely so can I. Wherever you may go. Night after night. And for people who couldn't pay, come on in. Come on, it's okay. Because everybody needs to hear this story. Because remember, there's no audience for this. There are no Black people around who could ever be interested in a story like this of a little colored girl who grew up in foster care. No one wants to hear that. That's not universal because love isn't universal. Love is this ineffable thing. You won't just have my word. I'll give my heart. Night after night, city after city, whoever would listen, I mounted my play, thinking that maybe that little Black girl, maybe that producer, that director, that person would see how necessary this story is. Black Lives Matter. No. Little Black girls and boys in foster care matter. Little Black girls and boys who are disproportionately represented, where there are more Black boys and girls in foster care than there are in the general American population. You won't just have my words. I'll give my heart. But I kept going, and then one night in 2017, I was lying in bed and the Aaliyah story came on. And my spirit spoke to me and said, tomorrow, call Lifetime. They will make your movie. The time is now. You won't just have my word. I did that. I woke up the next day. I hunted down the original producer who had pitched to Lifetime 10 years prior. I called him up and I said, Howard, the time is now. And he did not call me back. So I called another friend and said, do you have a contact at Lifetime? Girl, it's time to get this shit started. You won't just have my words. She calls her connection at Lifetime. And she says, I have a script. You must read it. You must. It grips you. It won't let you go. 2 days later, she said, I'd like to introduce you to our executive. We've just been greenlit for this movie to happen. But the next day there's a caveat, because the script that I had sent her was the script that I had used in graduate school to keep the story alive. Because Pat Schneider, the founder of Amherst Writers, said, even if you're speaking, even if you're talking, even if you're humming, you're writing. So in that 19-year span, I kept mentioning my story, my story, my story, my story. You won't just have my word. Because you see, I have to do this not just for me, but for every little Black girl who no one is paying attention to, every little Black girl who's historically misrepresented, every little Black girl who is hanging by her fingertips on a tightrope over the pit of her most probable, almost certain erasure. And the next day, they say, this is a script that isn't your script. And so what had happened is I had accidentally taken the script that I had sent, I thought it was the script I had sent to Sundance for the screenwriter, and Amy Redford read it and fell in love with that. I thought that was the same script I had sent my friend, but in fact, there were two separate scripts, and the one that went to Lifetime was the script that Howard had financed 16 years prior, and it is the one that they said they were going to greenlight. So the original producer had to go by the wayside, because this was now Howard's script. You won't just have my word. To be on set in Winnipeg, to have chosen the little Black girl to play me, to receive the selects of 17 little Black girls to play one Black woman was a highlight. And the song that I had written, you won't just have my word. I give my heart to you. Became the theme song in the movie. What is so brilliant about this is this movie was a love letter to a white woman who took a risk. Today they would call her woke, maybe. Today they would call her an ally, maybe. It would depend on who they are. But she was woke back then, and she was my ally. And as a result of that, I believed in myself. So let's keep this really straight. She's not my white savior, because if anything, she'd admit my love may have saved her. But that's not the trope that we're all so comfortable with. The little black girl who saves the white woman, that's called flipping the script. We're not familiar with that one. Nevertheless, it doesn't matter. Love saved both of us. It worked through and moved as us. And I would be remiss if I did not take this opportunity to say that that very woman who I wrote that love story of a movie, my book, whoever wins this book, this is it, I'll be signing this and sending it. Whoever, whatever, that woman is here on this screen. That woman who loved me as a little girl. That woman who I had always hoped that before I die, I would have an adult in my life who would show me what it meant to be a woman, what it meant to belong, what it meant to have my little girl be seen and heard and held and loved in a way that might make my one life more meaningful and impactful. And so Jean is here, Jean Kerr. She's here with me. She is that woke ally who loved me when I was a little girl, who would come and visit me in all 30 homes, who, while I was on the book tour with my first book, Somebody, Someone, she found me after 27 years on PBS, on CNN, I'm sorry, Book TV. You know? So I never stopped believing. The little girl in me never stopped believing. You won't just have my heart. I give my love to you. Thank you, Jeannie Kerr, for loving me when no one else could. Thank you for giving me a reason to write those songs. Thank you for being evidence of triumph of the spirit and that there is a law in the universe that, should any of us believe, surpasses its use in any lesser way to work towards triumph of the spirit. There it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you so much. And how lovely to have Jean in the audience. And so maybe in a minute we'll be able to see her. So we could do that now, actually. Jean, if you want to unmute yourself and say hello, we'll try and get you on the screen.
Hi.
Hi. Well, really,
Hey, Mom, what are you doing?
Baby girl. That was beautiful, honey. I love your singing. I love your song. Love you.
Thank you. Love you too.
Thank you. It's lovely to have you on our show. Glad you could join us. Now, before I forget, I'm going to do the drawing for the last book, for Regina's book, and that is Amanda McTeague. So that's our last book winner. Yay! So that's all our storytellers. That was quite a long evening for us tonight, but hope you enjoyed it. I found it all fascinating. Such a different selection of authors. So I'd like to bring each author back on one by one. So if each author, if you could unmute and say goodbye and wave when I call your name, that would be lovely. So first of all, Christy Clancy, if we could bring you back. You need to say something, Christy.
Oh, goodbye. Thank you for joining us tonight. Great stories.
Thank you, Christy. And then Stacey, thank you for your story.
Hi, thanks for listening. Go get your funny on.
Excellent. Get your husband to talk to you about lovely, interesting matters. And thank you very much to Raina.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Wonderful stories.
Thank you, Raina. And Baba.
Thank you. A beautiful communal experience. I appreciate one and all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Baba, for coming on. Shelley.
Thank you for giving me so many more books to buy.
I know, we're never going to get out of bed now, are we? It's going to be reading books the whole time. And also thank you, Regina, again.
Oh, me? Oh, by the way, you should all go to Amazon Prime and watch I Am Somebody's Child, the Regina Louise story. Okay, so put that on your watch list. I Am Somebody's Child, the Regina Louise story on Amazon Prime. Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you the name. Perfect. Okay, and then I'd like to bring back all our audience. So if you'd like to all, and thank you very much for being part of our live audience. It's really lovely. And also, I don't want to forget our tech guru, because without our tech guru, none of this would happen. So thank you very much to Tech. And please keep an eye on our website, which is 6 Feet Apart Productions, our Facebook page, and we'll have our next show coming up. We've got story slams, we've got storytelling, we've got comedy shows. Who knows what we're going to do next? So keep an eye out, and thank you very much for listening. And please remember to support Marcus Bookstores in Oakland. All right, then. Thank you very much. We're going to stay and have a bit of a party, get a glass of wine, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical. So step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.